piece of shit. You're a real stupid piece of shit. But I know I'm a piece of shit. And that makes me better than the other pieces of shit who don't know they're pieces of shit. Or is that worse? You don't deserve anything good in life. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. What does that do? Take that pity dick out of your mouth, dumbass. Why don't you do everyone a favor and just disappear? Oh god, is this life? You don't deserve peace and happiness. We just live, die, and then be forgotten. You don't deserve anything. You don't deserve it all. You don't deserve anything at all. Everything you touch is ruined. Everything you do gets ruined. Everyone gets ruined. All the relationships you have. Stop ruining. You gotta ruin everything. You just gotta ruin everything. What was I thinking? Dogs make life worth it. Life, dogs, I love you. I love life. I love life. I love life. I love life. Forever. Never can anyone hurt you. Oh, you're so jealous. Dogs, repent. I love you. I will kill for you. Hi, everyone. Hope you are well. I hope that intro hit a good middle ground between my sense of dark humor and topical scenarios, you can say, for those that struggle mentally on a daily basis. I thought that this was a very topical movie, one that I think is still appropriate for the spooky season for sure, because it is indeed a horror movie. This particular movie was perhaps my favorite horror movie of 2021. It's interesting because it wasn't your typical scary movie. A lot of the movies this year, for example, horror movies especially, have really been showing terror in supernatural extreme scenarios, you can say. Scenarios that obviously wouldn't happen in real life. That's what is so special and what makes this movie in particular stick out against the rest, at least in recent memory to me. This movie tackles the subject of mental health and mental illness as a whole. And to me, that is more scary than movies that portray scenarios that are, again, supernatural. Of course, there are many types of real life scenario events that are certainly more scary than supernatural. Stuff like serial killer documentaries, just anything usually involving deranged people doing deranged things to innocent people. This one in particular hit way more home and personal to me. The Night House. A recent widow begins to experience paranormal activity in her home as she tackles the grieving process. Upon further investigation, she discovers some very disturbing secrets left by her deceased husband. So around late summer going into fall last year, there were many movies that were coming out, many that were certainly blockbusters and ones that just got a lot of people exciting and talking to go see them just for the pure excitement of it. This movie's trailers in particular really stood out to me, and the odd thing is that I didn't hear anybody that I knew talk about it. Not about it coming out, not about interested in seeing it. Yet the trailer was probably the most intriguing one that I saw around that time. And I told myself, I want to go see that. It looks odd. It looks strange. It looks experimental. It looks like it honestly reeks of indie films. And I'm all for that. I'm all to go see people that change up the structure and change up the formula. Even if it ends up not working out, I still admire and respect filmmakers that go out and just go against the norm of what most blockbuster movies are set out to do, which is just, sell a product. This one certainly looked a lot more personal to me. And it did admittedly have some, creepy imagery here and there, of course. Trippy optical illusions, of course, is also another element of the trailers that gripped me. Upon doing further research of this movie prior to the release, I never heard of the director before, but upon seeing, his IMDb records, he seems to have had a lot of experience in horror movies at least. Never seen any of the previous horror movies before from this director, but hey, even if a horror filmmaker's previous work aren't critically acclaimed, it's still interesting, and I still usually do trust someone who has a lot of experience under the belt to go out and make something experimental for sure. Because by that point, they've honed in on their craft and they have grown confident in their abilities, you can say. Trigger warning, topics of suicide is the driving theme of this movie. And again, many people will find the contents of this movie quite disturbing and just very unsettling and unwilling to watch it because of that. And I get that. Let me just zoom in and hone in more on Rebecca Hall's character, because she also was an executive producer on this particular movie. And from her performance to the overall story of this take on grief, you can really feel the emotional connection that the lead actress had. It didn't seem like she was just doing it for a paycheck or to just get another big credit under her name. It really felt like she cared about this. And it really felt like she just put her whole emotional psyche even into this performance. I wouldn't be surprised if the actress went into a dark place in order to give this performance, but it was very effective for sure. I can only imagine an actor playing somebody whose significant other was lost to suicide. That is something that isn't out of this world. It's not like an actor is playing saving the world from aliens or fighting supervillains in extraterrestrial locations. This is a very grounded story with supernatural elements, of course, because the horror movie's got a horror. It very much stays focused on just this one character throughout the whole movie. We will discover more dark secrets that were occurring between Rebecca Hall and her husband. We see the abusive side of their relationship and secrets about him prior to his death. that slowly piece together a narrative all about how we can choose how to handle grief. The script and pacing of this movie is not afraid to have moments of dramatic silence among the characters, which for a story like this makes it even more believable. I don't know about you, but when it comes to someone dealing with something dramatic and something life altering, especially a loved one's death, they're usually processing everything still internally, and they're not just some social butterfly right immediately after. It's not uncommon for someone who's dealing with something like that to just be in silence, even if they are in public places with other loved ones in their company, because they just don't know what to say, because they are just trying to catch up with life. Because no matter what happens in life, it keeps moving forward, but sometimes we need a moment to catch up, to get back on that train, and we just seriously need moments alone to really process and accept what happened. I think a reason why this movie just didn't have much buzz going around it was because even the promotional material just didn't show any big supernatural bombastic entity coming after our lead actress. For those that just wanted big scares with big CGI monsters, are just going to be bored with this one for sure. This movie was just much more mature than that. Even all the supporting talent besides Rebecca Hall do a phenomenal job displaying grief in just very uncomfortable engagements. These characters are reacting to how Rebecca Hall's character is responding to this grief, and it can come out in lashes, sarcastic quotes, unsettling dark humor quotes, blunt remarks. These are very relatable outbursts that people who are struggling with grief can display. Seeing people get uncomfortable around that is so real, and I have seen it, and it's just incredible just how they displayed that so accurately. And there are many moments where Rebecca Hall's character is just fed up with everything that has to do with everything else in her life. You can tell that she just doesn't give a shit about damn near everything else that is happening in her life. It just doesn't compare or matter to her grief, and that is utterly heartbreaking to watch. Not even knowing much about the relationship between her and her husband. That's how powerful the performance and the dialogue was in this movie. Now, there are sequences in this movie where Rebecca is imagining and even seeing the secrets revealed to her through different sections of the house, just like the title suggests, the night house. The one place where her and her husband were staying at, where he committed suicide. It's now just an empty husk, yet with such a dark and sapping energy to it, that whenever Rebecca Hall is there, she sees and imagines events that reveal more stuff about her husband. And now this is where the artsy experimental elements come in. It's certainly confusing at first, because you don't know if what she is seeing is all in her head or if these are actual events that really happened to her or her husband. And it even starts to suggest that there is some entity in the house. Again, horror movies got a horror. Intrigues you into believing or into finding out what is the truth about what is in this house. Is it all imaginary? Is this something real? Is this something that is a threat? We don't know, but we are finding out alongside with her. We soon discover and confirm that all of these visions, you can say, were dream sequences, which I will admit is a pretty lazy technique when it comes to explaining exposition with characters that we didn't really get enough of, or we didn't really get enough explanation of. The actual moments that I guess are better than just exposition dumps are moments where we see Rebecca investigate herself in person, the house, and the different perimeters and locations that are around the estate. That to me is much more grounded and engaging. The creative shot compositions, though, whenever these trippy sequences were happening, were very creative and very enticing. Rebecca seeing iterations and illusions of her husband within the shapes and structures of the house are definitely the most memorable visuals of all these euphoric sequences. Again, trigger warning, another specific theme that played as the reason why the husband drove himself to suicide. We find out that her husband was actually on the prowl and right on the brink of hurting women, ones that specifically resembled his wife, our main character. He chose to kill himself because that was his way to avoid getting deeper into this pit of uncontrollable urges. And this is the first I can recall of seeing it in a movie where we have a tragedy occur, not for the sake of attention seeking, or so it's definitely in the realm of mental illness, but in order to prevent more tragedies from happening. Again, it's something that would be cliche in a movie about superheroes or in a movie about some other extraordinary event that is happening happening on the planet, but this is something that has just happened between a husband and wife in their home. The husband's motivation of killing himself to prevent further tragedy happening from his own actions, you tell yourself that this may be a very viable reason for someone to commit suicide in real relationships around the world because they're afraid to hurt their significant other or keep hurting others. That is tragic. Now, what most horror movies and what most movies in general would definitely do would have the husband come back and attempt to kill the protagonist for the sake of revenge or for the sake of someone who is just mentally lost. But the movie, again, it doesn't choose to do that. It chooses to do something so much more powerful. Now, bear with me. We do have a malevolent entity that starts to attack Rebecca Hall because she did believe that this entity was indeed her husband, and we were led to believe that this unforeseen entity was her husband the whole time, but we soon get the twist reveal that this is something else. But here is, I guess you could say, the other major twist, and the one that really stuck with me the most about what this entity was. And again, you could say that the ending of this movie was made to be open-ended in interpretation, but what I got from the movie was this entity was actually inside Rebecca Hall's character's mind the whole time, because this particular entity actually represented grief, depression, misery, and suicide. This unforeseen force aimed to reveal Rebecca Hall's character, the messed up things her husband did, and attempted to consume her to the point of driving her to commit suicide in the same exact way that her husband did. All of it by the end was very symbolic, and it was just pure psychological horror at its finest to me. I can't recall a movie that hit me so hard and scared me for very different reasons than what your typical horror movie would do. I can't recommend people enough to go out and see it. Caution warning, it deals with subjects that are hard to swallow. I think it is very important to share these stories and to bring awareness to what can really be happening to someone or many people throughout the world right now. Pretty damn scary. This was perhaps the best representation for mental health / illness I've seen in a very long time. I really want to keep supporting dark themes in mainstream movies. I hope you do too. Whether you yourself are struggling with stuff mentally or you know somebody that struggles with stuff mentally, emotionally, physically. We as human beings need each other. As much as we can admit that we are good on our own, you could certainly say that it's very possible to survive alone, but we desire connections. We need connections, and we need each other to make life just that much more bearable and that much more enjoyable. 9 out of 10, best representation for mental health awareness I've seen from a movie in quite a while. Psychological horrors, they just really get me. I'm at a lost words here.